The podcast that you're listening to is being presented to you with the cooperation of the SJ Network. If you're a person who needs a publicist and you want to appear on podcasts, contact Stephen Joyner at s-j-network.com. Let's get on with the show.
Welcome to the Season 9 finale of Too Many Podcasts.
It's our opportunity to thank everyone, including the people behind the scenes,
the guests on the Sherpa screening room,
all of the podcasters from this season.
Of course, you, the listeners, also known as the Rebels of the Sherpalution.
We hope that you are enjoying the show, and continue to listen.
And that you share the episodes, and review us on Apple Podcasts and Spotify.
We also hope that you'll be here for Season 10 and beyond.
And that you check out our earlier episodes as well.
From all of us, thank you for listening. And the Sherpa still hasn't paid us. Sorry, I wasn't supposed to read that part out loud.
Attention, Rebels of the Sherpalution. Today's podcast is brought to you by Audible. We would like to give you a free audiobook download and 30-day free trial, simply by heading to www.audibletrial.com/Sherpa. There are over 180,000 titles of audiobooks and podcasts, including this one, to choose from for your iPhone, Android, Kindle, or MP3 player. And now, the one and only Mr. Bruce will lead you into the Sherpa Chalet. As a reminder, since the Sherpa is a man of questionable taste, many of the foods sold in our cafeteria will be also.
Welcome to Too Many Podcasts, the podcast about podcasts. Now, podcasting from the Sherpa Chalet on Mount Podcastia, here's your host, Jim, the Podcast Sherpa.
Hello there, Rebels. Welcome to Too Many Podcasts. It is the podcast about podcasts and so much more. It is I, Jim, the Podcast Sherpa, coming to you from beautiful downtown Mount Podcastia. And, you know, I've been sampling so many history podcasts. We're going to call this episode Season 9 is History. Yes, it's the look back of all the wonderful guests that we've had on Season 9. And we're going to talk about some other stuff that's going on with the show that I think you should know. Very important things. Nothing bad, I promise. Don't worry. You don't have to clutch your handkerchiefs just yet. So, first of all, you know what I like to do. I like to thank everybody who's played a part in keeping this podcast going, because it's not just a one-man operation, really. Of course, we've got publicist extraordinaire Stephen Joyner and the vocal talents of Lord Mr. Bruce. And we'd like to thank all of you, the listeners, who are gradually growing in numbers. There were a few special comments made to the Sherpa Bride about how some listeners just love the podcast. And we are talking about you, Amber Gurgle, and we are talking about you, Linda Whitty. You're listening right now. And they say, that's me. I just got mentioned on a podcast and I didn't even have to do anything. Very cool, huh? We are making some dents into the podcast charts, I've noticed. I actually made it into the top 200 recently, into the arts podcasts in the United States, and also the performing arts podcasts in Japan within the top 200. And those are pretty big markets, so I'm pretty happy about that. So thank you all for listening and hopefully enjoying the show. It's just that simple. Thank you all very much. Let's talk some guests that we have to say thank you to. So we will start with some of the guests that we've had from the Sherpa Screening Room. And you can always check these shows out on your favorite podcast apps or Sherpalution.com. We had director Christy Crandall, actor Dylan Kelly, Stephen Patalo, who had the website of the music video Time Machine, actor Stan Livingston from My Three Sons. He was a lot of fun. He was a two-parter. That's definitely a good one to check out. Photographer Edward Dose. That was a real fun interview. Director Laura Ann Heaton-Gray. Voiceover actor Heath Martin. Actor DJ Shatine. Writer John Bukowski. Actor and comic Mark Scheffler, and also director Stephen Adam Rankovich, and in our season finale, the lovely and talented Sherry Nelson. Thank you all for coming by. And now it's time for some Sherpa suggestions, and those would be the ones who have been on the show and have podcasts. So cue the music, and let's talk about some podcasts. How about that?
And now it's time for Sherpa Suggestions.
We had Dax and his dad Kai of What's Under the Bed, Mr. Aaron Bossig, the right-hand man of publicist extraordinaire Steve Joyner, and the HungryTrilobyte, Hollywood Wade and the Crime and Entertainment Podcast, Michael Arboway of the Quidditas Factor. I got it right this time. And of course, Percy Brown of the Prince of Fresh Air. We also got to talk to Khalil Smith of the IDON Active Health Show. And a bunch of movie podcasts. We had Mike White of The Projection Booth and Brian Parkinson of The Other Interview Show. And Stephen J. Rubin of Stephen J. Rubin's Saturday Night at the Movies. He's a fave. We like him. And don't forget that we also spoke to Jennifer Page, of course, of Odd Tonic, previously, sometimes. She's got her own podcast called I Talk to Ghosts. You got to check it out. Definitely one that's on my playlist, that's for sure. Wrestler and voice-over actor Flynn Hendricks with I Know You Hear Me. And finally, definitely a much-anticipated interview that I had. I was glad that I got to do. A guy named Frank Verderosa, who is originally from the Gilbert Gottfried Amazing Colossal podcast. He's got 2 podcasts of his own, Unsung and Everyday Odysseys. Give them a listen. Really great. That's a really cool list that I've sent you. I think you're going to enjoy a whole bunch of them. Now that we've handled the Sherpa Suggestions, we're going to talk Sherpa samples.
Be a rebel. Follow the show at Sherpalution on Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook.
For this edition of Sherpa Samples, I figured I would look into some personal finance podcasts. Now, there are a lot of money podcasts out there that talk about the stock market and the economy and so on and so forth, and they are all really great in their own right. But these were more of a personal nature. I know sometimes hearing podcasts about stocks can be a little bit overwhelming for some people, but I figured let's go at the common level that we can all relate to. It's important to keep in mind that these podcasts are intended for informational purposes and are not to be taken as financial advice. But there are some really interesting points that a lot of these episodes brought up. I really enjoyed all of them. They were all very valuable, and they talked about a lot of different topics, which I really enjoyed. Here's some of the few that I checked out. And I might tell you that I listened to the Clark Howard podcast, which is a very good personal finance podcast, and also Be Wealthy and Smart with Linda P. Jones, which is a little more stock-oriented. It follows the stock market, but she really breaks it down and makes it very easy to understand. I think it's a great podcast. If you're just getting into investing, start listening to her from the beginning and you can really understand what's going on because she explains everything so well. Some of the ones that I've checked out are, of course, The Ramsey Show, and you can't talk podcasts about finance without talking Mr. Dave Ramsey, who's pretty much made a network of a whole bunch of different financial podcasts, and he takes questions from a lot of the listeners and provides responses. So really good show. The Money Guy Show, that's with Brian and Bo. Again, very similar format, taking questions from the listeners and providing good answers because everybody's financial situation is different, of course, right? Of course. The Retirement Answer Man, who is Roger Whitney, and he also does the same thing. A lot of these are really, listeners write in, they ask a question, and he answers them. And they're all very pleasant people to listen to. There's no swearing or anything like that. It's pretty friendly, very polite. If you are over in the UK, you might want to check out the Meaningful Money podcast or Money for the Masses, because they really talk a little bit more about the British side of personal finance, and some of the topics that they discuss might be a little more suited to where you are living. How to Money was hosted by Joel and Matt, who are two best friends who talk to finance people and they drink some craft beer. And by the way, Joel was actually a producer on the Clark Howard Show, and he ventured out on his own with his buddy, and they went and did the podcast. He'd be a good guest for the show, don't you think? I think so too. And there's also Jill on Money, who is Jill Schlesinger. And the episode that I listened to, she actually spoke to the listener and
talked about how to plot out his finances, making suggestions. There's also Talking Real Money with Don McDonald and Joe Koch, and that's really what they do, talk real money. And there's one show that I checked out called Money Rehab, which is hosted by Nicole Leapin. I'm sorry if I mispronounce her name. And unfortunately, the episode that I listened to was her 400th, and she said she was going to be taking a little bit of a break, but I really enjoyed that episode. So I hope she comes back and does something in that sort of form, or I got to get caught up on some of those older episodes. I really liked her straightforward presentation. A little sweary in this one, but straightforward and very helpful. I really enjoyed it. I listened to the Bigger Pockets Money podcast, and I have to tell you, the episode that I listened to was an episode with an expert on Social Security, and that was probably the best explanation that I've ever heard on how Social Security works and what people should be doing while planning for their retirement. Definitely a highly recommended episode, and if all the other episodes are like that, this is definitely a podcast that you want to check out. And finally, I came across a podcast called Afford Anything, and it is hosted by a lady named Paula Pant. And on a lot of episodes, they do questions when they're not interviewing folks. And guess who is fielding the questions with her on it? Yes, I know, you know it. Former guest, friend of the podcast, Mr. Joe Saul Seahigh. He was right there, providing backup for his buddy Paula, and it was a really interesting show. I really enjoyed it. They're definitely having a lot of fun recording it. You will have a lot of fun listening to it. All in all, really, every one of them, it was 11 podcasts. Wow, 11 money podcasts. Woohoo! Why aren't I rich? I don't know. I have to pay better attention, I guess. These are all enjoyable podcasts for personal finances. And again, they're meant to be informational and not to be taken strictly as financial advice because everybody's situation is different. So what works for me may not work for you. What works for you may not work for me. And I'm going to end up broke wherever. Good thing I'm just sinking all my money into Left Socks. And Left Socks would be my cue to lead us right into the outro. Well, wait a minute. Before we go, let's talk about a little bit of what's going on here at the Sherpalution. Now, you can hear every episode on your favorite podcast apps and Sherpalution.com. And we thank all those platforms for making the show available to you. And you'll notice that I really don't charge any money to listen to it. That's not going to change going into season 10, Rebels. Don't worry. But it is kind of good to raise money for the podcast, so maybe we can do nice things for the listeners or even help use better equipment for the show so it sounds even nicer for you, or even just to make money that these podcasts say that I should be earning. I'm not a member of Patreon, and I have no problem with anyone who is a member of Patreon, but I've actually found another way that I could possibly make money, and this is up to you. If you go to Sherpalution.com, you will notice that we now have affiliate links. So if you go to Amazon.com or Paramount Plus or Southwest Airlines or maybe some of the other businesses that are listed on that page and you click on that link and you make a purchase, I can actually earn a commission from that. So thank you very much, just in case you would be so kind to do that. If you don't, hey, that's cool. But it's just an option. It is within the law for me to tell you, yes, I am an affiliate. I feel so affiliated now. Ooh, I don't know. And also, if you like, Sherpalution.com also has a site where you can donate money if you feel that, if you want to pay money to have me locked up, we can do that too. And there's also the T-Sherpa shop where you can purchase podcast merchandise for this very show, folks. It's all there, right on Sherpalution.com. Check out some of those links. I'm sure there might be something that you like somewhere in there. I'm giving you a lot of options here, folks. Lots of options. And as I mentioned, we will be going into season 10. I know I've got some episodes and interviews coming up with some really great guests, with some more podcasters, and I'm sure with more folks from the entertainment field that you are going to enjoy. So thank you so much. If you can, please leave a review on Apple Podcasts to help spread the word, or even on Spotify as well. You can share my episodes on your social media pages if you like. Maybe if there's somebody that you say, well, you've got a twisted sense of humor, maybe you want to hear this podcast. Nice words like that. It's always something that you can do to help the Sherpalution grow, and I would appreciate anything that you can do. Also, gone on a couple of other new pages. Yes, to speak to people. Yes, I didn't mention that I'm on the Wisdom app. Normally, I'm on Wednesday nights around 10:30 p.m. Eastern Daylight Time, and I usually do talks about podcasts and podcasting. And if you'd like to talk to me about podcasts, like if you've got a favorite podcast or you just want to be interviewed, or if there's maybe a favorite show that you've had, if you want to ask about my podcast, if you've got a podcast that you'd like to talk about and we can have a little interview, they give you 10 minutes to talk. It's a wonderful community. I've met some incredible people doing this. You can also leave me voicemail messages through Sherpalution.com. You can also leave it through Anchor FM. And also through the Swell app, Swell. That's absolutely free. So if you've got any questions, feel free to leave me a question and I will leave you an answer. Because that's what you do when somebody gives you a question. You can also contact me through email, if you like it that way. JimThePodcastSherpa@gmail.com. All lowercase letters, one big word. Don't forget that dot and the at. It's very important, or else it goes undeliverable. See, there's your little tech tip for the day. Thank you, Sherpa. You're quite welcome. That's all I have to say. We've got it all covered. Be sure to tune in next Wednesday and every Wednesday after that. Forever! As long as this show is running. And spread the word. And once again, I thank you all for your kindness and your patience with me. And your tolerance for me, too. So in the meantime, Mr. Bruce and I will be getting ready for Season 10 on Too Many Podcasts. And, of course, more episodes of the Sherpa Screening Room. And we hope that you'll join us. In the meantime, folks, Viva La Sherpalution, and we will see you Season 10.
Thanks for listening to Too Many Podcasts. Please disperse. You can go home now. I said you can go home now. Viva La Sherpalution. Viva La Sherpalution. Oh. Yeah, I'll come back now, you hear?